Good morning, genealogy friends. It is Wednesday. I'm here to talk about using the research reference bundle, and all of my kids are at school at the moment. It is a Christmas miracle. So let's do this before I get a phone call from the school saying I gotta pick somebody up. Flip this around. Good morning. Oh, I should probably stay standing. Okay. I've wanted to talk about the research reference bundle now for days. What am I, like a week late? A lot of you purchased it over Black Friday. Thank you. It's still available. The research reference bundle is available if you look at the small bundles and single pages section of the shop. I'll do something to make it more apparent. Some people have been like searching for it and they can't find it. But the research reference bundle, it's a different animal on the site than, I can't believe that wasn't the school, but I jinxed myself by saying I might get a phone call. Okay, what makes the research reference bundle different? It is not designed to be pages that go into your ancestor chapters in your family tree notebook. Good morning, Dolores. It is designed to go into a different kind of notebook that helps you with your genealogy work. But not necessarily something that you present to somebody else. I have had research reference notebooks and locality guides and things like that floating around forever, but they tend to be messy and chaotic, and that's why I've never sold the pages. But they're so helpful, and if you need help putting a guide together on your own, then I think that the pages will really help you. So instead of showing you one that I've had for years that's messy and imperfect and full of pages that I've created that I'm not selling, I made a new one starting the week before last. And so this one is less full, but I'm hoping that it shows you the process of putting a book together. And I'm thinking we'll do the video now, and then maybe in a month or something like that, when I've worked on it more, we'll visit it again and see the progress. So let me show you what I'm working on. Oh, that's chat. Where's the, hi, I can do this. Okay, so in the bundle, there were two different cover guides. One says research reference bundle, or one says research reference guide, because there's no reason for it to say bundle. The other one says locality research guide. I use both. Research reference, sometimes I'll use that not for a location, but for an event. I have one for like events surrounding adoptions in a certain place in the country for one of my ancestors. I've got one that has to do with Polish immigration in the United States and the immigrant communities that were created. This one, I went for the locality research guide because I'm researching a place called Gilmer County, West Virginia. Specifically, I'm researching a town called Locality, which is not a town. Gilmer County, West Virginia is an Appalachian community. No, it's an Appalachian location. And it's one of the places that's in my husband's family tree. I am not familiar with Appalachia, either geography or culture, or I don't have any Appalachian relatives in my family. So I needed to ground myself, and that's why I'm creating this research guide. So, here you can see I'm using the notes page. This is, and you'll see some of the stuff is done on the iPad, some is done on the computer, and some is done by hand. And that's because as I'm going, this is a casual bundle. I don't worry usually about making it look too nice. One of the things that you'll notice about this page, there's no index number. There's no index number because this isn't running off of a family tree index. The research reference bundle pages don't have index numbers for this reason. Now I use pages later on here that have an index number, but we'll get to why I included those and why they're not in the bundle. Anyway, this is just notes about, I'm looking at Locality in Gilmer County, but then there's also these other towns around that area that I also need to look for. This is an image of the family, one of the families that was rooted in that area. Normally I wouldn't actually include a lot of family pictures unless I had pictures of buildings or other things I needed to research. The reason I included this one is because there's so many names and dates, and this is taken in Glenville, West Virginia, which is the general area that I'm researching. Okay, so we've got the state guide page here. This is because I need to gather information about West Virginia. And I don't mean like elementary school state report. This is information that I need that will help me when I'm doing genealogy research. So I need to know, okay, if I'm looking at the time period of interest, which is 1820 to 1970 for me, because that's when the people that I'm looking at, that's when they lived in that area. So West Virginia doesn't get statehood until 1863. So before then, it's just Virginia. So that makes a big difference when I'm doing research. So federal census would be under Virginia until 1870. And then it talks about when birth and death records begin. Now, this is when they're required. It's not necessarily when they first show up, but there's also a big fire that was destroyed, that destroyed state level records in 1921. And a note just saying that West Virginia is the only state completely within the Appalachian region. That's important because that means that books that touch on Appalachian history or, you know, societies that focus on Appalachian ancestry, things like that, that's going to include West Virginia. Now breaking it down a little bit more to Gilmer County, which is really what I'm looking at, but I'm going even more specific with this guide just because I had to, because it's sort of a mystery what happened with this community. So I'm looking at Gilmer County, and you can see the dates here for when their birth, marriage, and death records at the county level, they're a lot earlier. So this is good because this tells me that, okay, I'm not going to be looking for a birth record from 1820 in Gilmer County, West Virginia, because as we've just learned, it wasn't a state. But then we've also got birth records for Gilmer County, West Virginia that start before West Virginia was West Virginia. So this is important. This also talks about how the county was formed from these two other counties. So those are counties that I may need to look at when I'm looking for older records, and that the county was divided into civil townships, and then less than 10 years later, it's divided into these 4 magisterial districts. And so knowing which one I'm looking at is important. So I'm actually looking at Glenville. So, and then this is a region guide. This gets even more specific. I'm specifically looking for Lockney because that seems to be the central, that's where the family lived for a long time, things like that. Lockney is almost a nothing. Again, I'm not familiar with West Virginia per se, and yet it still surprises me that Lockney is just, it's funny, we have ghost towns, I guess, out here in the West, but they hold, like, they stay there. The people leave, but the town stays there. So you go and there's broken down buildings and things like that, but the town stays there. Lockney has been hard to find because it's just, it's like, it just isn't there anymore. And so I'm trying to figure out exactly when Lockney stopped being Lockney. The post office left in 2002, so it's relatively recently, and it has the coordinates and this little thing about the establishment of the post office, but there isn't a whole lot about the history of Lockney, West Virginia, which is kind of sad because there was a community of people who lived here and they left and took their history with them, and nobody's put it on the internet. Okay, now I included some dividers in the research reference bundle. One of the dividers is the maps divider, because maps for these kind of bundles, whether you're doing research reference guides or locality guides like this one, I feel like maps are really important. This is the blank page, you can see, with no index number, and I just put on this, it's a geological survey. It's only, the circled area is where Lockney is. Geological survey maps are interesting, but they're not actually that helpful other than to show that, like, you know, Lockney was registered as a place and recognized as a place at the time of making this map. This is another blank page just showing what Lockney looks like when you try to look it up today. It gives you these coordinates and it shows you where it should be, but there's nothing there. Also, I'm noticing that everything in this area, the directions and addresses, they're all just based on these coordinates. We don't use that here in Utah, so that's been new for me. And this is, again, this is stuff that I need to write down and write out like this so that I can understand why I'm getting certain research answers or why I'm hitting certain roadblocks. This is an aerial view. Those of you who bought the bundle will notice that I do have the correct spelling on my page, and you have a page with the bad spelling. I will be sending out the correct spelling today. Sorry about that. Anyway, this is a satellite view of Lockney, and it's the little red. This is Lockney. There's nothing there. It's mountains. Yeah, which again, this is new for me. Just vanishing places. And then I've got a map comparison page. I use this kind of a lot, and you can see this is a 1911 map, and then this is the Google map, which is Gilmer County. And there's similarities, but you can see that Lockney appears here, and yet it's completely fallen off of this map up here. And also these edges are more specific on today's Google Maps, whereas this is obviously like kind of an artistic rendering of Gilmer County, which is something that's important to remember when you're looking at historical maps and trying to force them to, you know, when you're doing an overlay of today's satellite images and things like that. Sometimes it's important to remember that in 1911 people were doing the best they could, but they're not necessarily as specific as maps are today. And then just a street view. This will be more helpful for some of you. It's nothing for me. This is where Lockney should be, and it's actually listed as Normantown. There's just, you know, there's just nothing there. So haven't ever been there. Kind of feel like I need to go out there now and just stand there and look around. Like, all right, where did this town go? I use blank note paper a lot to scribble things before I make pages and print them out. Historical background, you can see this is one of the ones where I just printed out the page and then did my own scribbling. This is not historical background of Lockney or Gilmer County or anything like that. I could include that. This is historical background as it pertains to my husband's family moving around in this area. So this is, I'm only saying that because I want you to remember that this page, this is for you to use however it would be most useful to you. I don't need to write a report about the history of Gilmer County. That's not going to be as useful to me as just writing notes about what it is that I'm looking for and like things that I'm finding that would indicate why an entire community would up and leave. Same with, I've got historical background and social history divided. You could technically put social history on a historical background page. So social history is a little bit different for me than historical background because it's talking about, you know, the people. And the people don't always, sometimes social history can mean one migration that happens just in this blink of history or one event that happens in a blink of history. It's not the full history, but it's worth noting. That's when I use social history pages. So here I'm talking about the community migrating together for work and how so many people from West Virginia were making it to Ohio, which is what my family did. I don't know if anybody has read the book Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance, but it talks about how, you know, whole communities from Appalachia left because they needed to find work and they took their culture and their history and everything with them. And this, you know, massive migration out of Appalachia. A notes page that I thought I was going to need, same with original settlers. I thought that maybe his family was among the original settlers. The problem with finding information about the original settlers of Lockney, Gilmer County, West Virginia, is that so far I'm really having a hard time finding Lockney. So I don't know who originally settled there because I'm having a hard time proving that the people are there. I've got a compiled genealogies section. I've included this next to the histories because often compiled genealogies will have local history in it. A compiled genealogy is just some genealogy that somebody else wrote and put together. Most of us have these kind of like typewritten, you know, things that people have tried to do that then get shuffled around in family papers. This is one from my husband's family and it has names and dates, but it does have, and not all of this applies to West Virginia, but I included the whole thing. And then it has some alternative names. So Withers, West Virginia, and Middle Run, West Virginia. Apparently these are all the same place, and the place vanished. It's very challenging. So moving to the next section, then we've got a place where I'm collecting information about resources that I may want to take advantage of. So historical societies. This is the Gilmer County, West Virginia Historical Society, which at the moment it doesn't seem to have a ton of volunteers, but it does exist. And they also have their Facebook page, and I put a note here that they're selling a cookbook with local history or local recipes, and then they have a county history, and I've got the prices. I haven't ordered anything, but that's because I'm planning on ordering that. I just haven't gotten around to it. Archives and libraries. It depends on where you're researching. I have really thick archives and libraries sections for my Northern California research because Bay Area history is held in libraries all over the place and archives all over the place. And so I have to have lots of contact information. My West Virginia, so far it's thinner. This is just an article that I printed out that talks about the Vital Research Records Project and the progress they've made, but then also some of the roadblocks and things like that. Because again, you don't want to be hunting down a record that they have explained just isn't available digitally yet. You have to go there in person. This is the West Virginia State Archives Library. I have a state library page, but I put this on the archive page instead. And I've got contact information, but then also they don't answer email research requests and the address for when you need to, or where you need to send in your research request with the fee. The microfilm collection, this is a collection that's held at the Family History Library, but I haven't had a chance to go there. This open space is so that I can write down the specific microfilm that I want to look up when I get there. But I need to get into each ancestor's information and find the numbers. This is their local library. This is the Gilmer Public Library. And I called, and they don't have a set genealogical collection, but they do have surname vertical files. And there's a vertical file, which includes one of the surnames that I'm researching. If you've never used a vertical file, it's exactly what it sounds like. Most of the time it is truly like a hanging folder. And they just put in clippings and obituaries and photos and everything. And they organize stuff by surname, and it's a way for libraries to have genealogical information without having to create a new category for everything. You never know what you're going to get in a vertical file. If it's going to be some newspaper where, your ancestor was sort of mentioned in a side way, or if it's going to be like the vertical file contains all of these original letters that somebody found at an estate sale. So you always want to ask. I need to write down exactly what I want them to photocopy and send me, and I haven't gotten that far. Publications divider. So this is a list of local publications for Gilmer County. They're microfilmed, but so far none of them have been digitized, which is difficult. It's just a book excerpt from the history of West Virginia talking about Gilmer County. Not super handy, but again, this is where I don't want to spend my time writing all of this out. I might as well just include it in this little page so that I have it in my book. This is a magazine article of all things from Boy's Life, and it just talks about life in the small town. I thought it was interesting and I wanted to include it, but genealogically, it's not interesting enough for me to include it in somebody's ancestors chapter. This is a large newspaper article from 1915 that talks about how the city is being limited by the fact that they don't have access to, or the county is being limited by the fact that they don't have access to the railroad. Another newspaper article with items from Gilmer. And this talks about there's a lock and dam on this river, and it's affecting the county economically. Online source. So this is from the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, and it talks about why is there a West Virginia and the social attitudes that led to secession and how secession happened after the Civil War, or sort of during, it's all tied into Civil War history, and there's all this different stuff. So I'm going to look at the public statements that were made in support and things like that, because all of that's going to be recorded. They didn't just up and decide, okay, well, let's just take a vote with these 5 people. There was a lot of discussion before West Virginia became West Virginia. That's going to say a lot about the social and political climate that my husband's ancestors were living in. But this online source, because it's not somewhere that I need to focus a ton of time, I just wanted to scribble that down so I could look at it later. And then we've got unique items. This is kind of a catch-all. This West Virginia State Folk Festival actually happens in Gilmer, and it looks like a lot of fun. I think this is something that we might end up taking our kids to if we can get them out there, because my kids are so far removed from the fact that this is part of their history. And part of that's because I'm so out of it, because this is my husband's family, and I haven't done a whole lot of research or work with this part of the country. The words that I kept running into that didn't mean what I thought they meant. Holler or hollow is just a small valley. But I guess hollows are often sheltered, and then coves are valleys surrounded by mountains, which for me, a cove needs an ocean, so I was really confused about that. A tater hole just means a cold cellar, and a wish book is the mail order catalog. These are things that are, it's like they're in either newspaper articles or they're coming up in letters we have in the family, and I'm just I don't know what that word means. Subject experts. I've got the contact for somebody who's the West Virginia Regional History Center. This is where you would write down the information if you're taking a class, or if you do an online Zoom thing for somebody, talking about finding your genealogy in West Virginia. You're going to want to write down the contact information for that person and whoever else they bring on, because when you have a question, you want to know, okay, I don't want to just email like info@Family Search, I want to email the person that did the Zoom presentation on the history of West Virginia. So you want to have their information, even if you're not ready to email them yet. Local artifact isn't really an artifact, but I needed somewhere to put this sign just because I thought that was a nice thing. Local cuisine, this is actually coming from that same festival. But this is all of the stuff that these people were serving. I don't know how much of this is traditional and not, but I wanted to include that. Point of interest. There's a house there that I wanted to write down, but I couldn't actually find information about whether or not it was still standing. So I printed these out, and then I ended up not using these. Same with the school. I thought I had found the school, and then it's the wrong school. But the school page does exist, and you can see all of these pages, like I mentioned, they don't have that index number. And then at the back here, this is something that you may or may not want to include. Now, I included a divider for Ancestor One sheets. Ancestor One sheets are pages that come in a different bundle. And there's a timeline here because I need to write down, okay, when was everybody actually in West Virginia, but I haven't done that yet. Ancestor One sheets are these pages that have a lot of ancestor information on one thing. Now you can see that these pages are from the Thistle collection, whereas so far the research reference bundle, it's only available in original gray. That's because the book that these people come from is in Thistle, and also I wanted to make sure that you guys understood that the Ancestor One sheet page itself is not included in the research reference bundle. The divider is included because if you're making any kind of, whether it's locality research or research reference or any kind of notebook like this, you may want to hang on to the specific information about the people that are being affected, like the people that are why you're creating this book. These are the people who lived, were born, died, or lived at some point in this area. And you can see this is a lot more informal than their ancestor chapters. Here I've got all of Amanda's children listed, and then over on her husband's page I just have, okay, we've got the 5 on Amanda's, and these are more of his other children because they were having lots of children. And some of these I don't have the full date of birth or anything, but I have their basic information. I also have their index number. That way, if I really need to cross-reference with my family tree notebook while I'm doing research, I can find them easily. But this is so that I can keep straight, okay, who exactly am I looking for? Because you don't want to be looking for somebody living in Lockney, West Virginia, who spent their entire life in Pennsylvania or in Tennessee, because I've got the wrong part of the family. Anyway, that is the progress, so far on my West Virginia locality research guide. I hope that gives you an idea of how to use the pages. The bundle has 100 pages. I think there's actually a little more than 100 pages. And, well, it's actually 200 pages, but that's because it's right hand and left hand. So there's lots of pages. Once again, you're not going to need all of them. It's just so that you have options and so that you have some guidance when you're thinking about, okay, what could I pull together that would make the rest of my genealogy work more easier? What could I pull together and research on my own so that if I do go to a conference or a presentation or something like that, I know what questions I wasn't able to answer on my own, or I have enough of a background from my own research that when they're talking about things, I know exactly what they're talking about. Genealogy is I love genealogy for so many reasons, but one of the reasons I love it is because it is the study of people and it's the study of history simultaneously, and you really need to understand both at the same time to make any progress. This is how you understand the history without making yourself crazy or without feeling like you need to get a bachelor's degree in West Virginia history. I want to learn more about the Appalachian region and West Virginia. I have no interest in learning enough to write my own book. I basically want to learn enough to be able to keep doing the genealogy research, to keep building on my husband's family, and to tell our kids where they came from. But I don't want to hold all of that in my brain. So I can dump it into this book, and then when I'm working, I can pull the book out, research, reference, look through, and then I can just put the book back on the shelf and not have to use brain space holding all of that in, if that makes sense. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. I think it'll be fun to come back in a month or two and show you how the book has grown, how some of the notes have turned into actionable items and things like that. if anybody else is actually using their pages already and has stuff to share, you should put up photos in like our genealogy group, the Family Tree Notebooks genealogy Facebook group, or leave comments or stuff like that, because people love to see what other people are doing. I think that's really inspiring. So anyway, all right, I gotta go return this phone call, and yeah, I should see you guys on Friday.